there's a couple of things with Steve Johnson. So Steve, not only was he the first speaker of ProductCamp Minnesota, which was the first iteration that Barry and Jennifer Doctor did maybe 10 years ago or something like that, Steve. But then also he was the first pragmatic instructor. And so there's a lot of ties why you're destined to be a keynote for this event. And so really great to have Steve here. He also is the author of Turning Ideas into Product book. You can get it on Amazon, digital or physical books. Additionally, yes, there we go. It almost matches everything. You got everything matching. But I'm sure you know Steve, or if you don't know Steve, you should know Steve. Grab a virtual coffee with him. He's a wealth of knowledge. He, like I say, as a first pragmatic instructor, he's somebody you got to know. So Steve, take it from here.
Okay, thank you for that introduction. So I thought what I find is most product managers get into the job by accident, and that's kind of what happened with me. I majored in marketing and minored in computer science in school, and couldn't get a job because nobody was doing both computers and marketing. So I took a job as a programmer, and I did that a couple of years, and a buddy of mine hooked me up for an interview as a sales engineer, which is a job I'd never heard of. And if you've never heard of it, think of it this way. Two people go on a sales call. One of them knows the product. The other one drives the car. So the first one there is the sales engineer. And so I did that for a couple of years and then figured, well, heck, I can drive a car. So I went into sales and found out, there was a lot more to it than just driving the car. There was also, discounting. So I did that for a couple of years and I started outselling everybody else. And my boss said, I don't know what you're doing, but could you do it to the rest of the office? And so I did a Saturday lunch and learn with my sales team, and suddenly we're outselling everybody else on this product. And then the VP called me and said, dude, I don't know what you did to Virginia, but could you do it to the rest of the country? So I did a road show across the country and ultimately ended up in Los Angeles, which is where our corporate headquarters were. And while I was doing that training, the VP of marketing came in and said, dude, who are you and what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm just a sales guy from Virginia. I'm out here, training how to sell this product. And he said, well, see, that's not your job. That's product management. And I went, oh, really? What is that? And he said, yeah, nobody knows. So I became a product manager. In fact, what we would now call a product marketing manager. And then a few years after that, I moved up through the ranks to be the head of marketing for a company. And then a buddy of mine started Pragmatic. And a couple of years later, he called me and said, hey, I'm making a living, come join me. So I was the first instructor hired. I was there for 15 or so years. And then a few years ago, I started working in my own business, helping teams implement best practices of product management. And the one best practice that seems to be the most confusing is roles and responsibilities. So that's what we're going to explore today. Let me share my screen here. There we go.
We can see it, Steve.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to talk about maybe we should be problem managers. And some of you who may have seen me, or some of you may have seen me last year. I was talking about that as well. But anyway, here are my coordinates. You can get in touch with me through Twitter or through email. And I'm also running a survey right now with product growth leaders focused on professional development. So I'd love to have your insights there at u10.me/survey. And I'll give that link again as we move along. There we go. So what would you say you do here? And it seems to me in so many organizations, nobody has really any idea what product management is. And in fact, the video we saw earlier, it seemed like his interpretation of product management was cajoling the developers to work harder. But it seems like we're not that clear on what we do here. And maybe what it seems like the most is playing a video game, that you're shooting down bad ideas from all over the organization, and sometimes they shoot back. And maybe that's why 47% of product management time is spent in unplanned activity, according to a survey from last year. cleaning up the mistakes others have made, or perhaps putting out fires that others have created. And the question we have to ask is, do we want to put out fires or put out products? It seems like we spend so much time in these unplanned activities, these emergencies, but product management should be much more systematic than that. It should be much more methodical than that. And yet, maybe here's why. Product management is clearly defined and understood in only 21% of organizations. It seems to me that when we don't have a clear definition of what product management is, then we just do whatever anybody asks us to do. And some of you may have a role of product owner. And this is a great job and it's important to the business, but product owner is product management as defined by developers. It's represent the market to us or read aloud to us from Jira. It's product development's view of product management. And, you know, hey, if you went and talked to a sales guy and said, hey, what is product management? They'd say, oh yeah, product managers are great on sales calls, which is true. And I had a big argument with a guy on that very topic. The sales guy said, I try to take a product manager on every sales call. And I said, well, that's not their job. And the sales guy said, yeah, but they're really good at it. And I said, yeah, they really are good at it. It's not their job. And they're like, yeah, but they're really good at it. Just because you're good at it doesn't necessarily make it product management. So I'm going to give you a tool today so that you can figure out whether you ought to be doing this or not. So let's get to what is product management. And maybe we can get there if we work our way up from all the activities that we're being asked to perform. Hey, could you go visit a customer with me? Hey, could you, do a prototype for a user experience? Could you write this positioning? Could you write this blog post? Could you give us some content for the ebook? There's a lot of things we're being asked to do, like maybe customer discovery and stories and prototyping and features and demos and RFPs and. There's so many things we could be doing because, hey, we're pretty smart people and we know the product pretty well and I write a coherent sentence. There are lots of things I could do, but it helps, when in doubt, it helps to go back to Peter Drucker, who is the father or grandfather or great-grandfather of modern management. And he said in a well-run organization, each role has a single orientation. They either support customers, that is customers one at a time, or they support the market, that is the market full of customers. So maybe if we started thinking about all these activities we're doing, we could cut the list in half or into a third by saying, well, some of these things are about markets and some of these things are about customers. So maybe there's a delineation that would be helpful. But even in the market side, we can cut that in half too. Because some of the things we do for the market are about problem discovery, and some of the things that we do in the market are about solution design. So here's where it gets fun. So you look at all these things that we're being asked to do, like customer discovery. Now it's confusing because it has the word customer in it, right? So you think that would be about a customer, but you shouldn't be doing customer discovery with one customer. You should be doing customer discovery with myriad customers, many customers, so that you've got an idea of what the market needs, not just what a customer needs. And then, we write stories about that, and then somebody builds a prototype, and then eventually development builds a feature, and then we demonstrate the product to a customer. So these are the kinds of things we do, but where it gets interesting is to do this yourself. After the conference today or tomorrow morning before the kids get up, write down all the things that are taking your time. Look at a typical week. What things did you do that took more than an hour? Emails, demos, financials, writing, business planning, rating severity of bugs. And then you use this to apply to this little 3-column model. And this is how I put a bunch of things, like in the first column, writing requirements, maintaining the roadmap, researching the market. The solutions column has prototyping and ebook content. The delivery column has, like creating a statement of work for professional services or demoing the product for a client. And here's the fun part. the delivery stuff is important. It's also not product management. It's sales and sales engineering. And you know what? The solution stuff is also not product management. That's development and marketing. And I'll come back to that point here in a second. So understanding problems in the market is the number one thing for product managers. And yet I can't tell you the number of times I've talked to product people who say, oh yeah, I don't have time. I don't have time to go visit a customer. I'm too busy doing solutions. I'm too busy doing delivery. I'm too busy doing other people's work. If we can use a hockey metaphor here, which I'm pretty terrible with sports metaphors, but I'm pretty sure your goalie should not be your top scorer. The goalie has a job to protect the net. And if he's on the other side of the court, he's not doing his job, he's doing somebody else's job. So if he's off doing the forward's job, who's doing the goalie's job? And I think that's the biggest issue I encounter in product management, is we're so busy doing everybody else's job, we've failed to do our own. I prefer a metaphor. You've probably heard a number of metaphors. One is, you know, the product manager is the CEO of the product, which seems really motivating until you've realized you can't get anybody to do anything. And I heard one the other day that I find fairly disturbing. They described product manager as like a waiter in the restaurant. You know, the customer comes in and says, this is what I want. And as the waiter, as the product manager, you take the order back to development so they can fix the dish, and then you fetch it and bring it back to the client. And that's product management. And that's a terrible metaphor. It's almost like, you know, somebody comes into your restaurant and says, well, I know you're an Italian restaurant, but I really want you to make me a hamburger or some chicken nuggets. Well, that's not what we do here. That's not one of our capabilities. But worse than that, it's like a customer comes in and says, hey, I want some spaghetti, but instead of a marinara sauce, I want you to use motor oil. And that's just bad. And yet we get requests like that, not quite that obvious, but just because a customer asks for it doesn't make it a good idea. The idea of the orchestra leader that I like is the orchestra leader makes sure we're all working from the same sheet of music. We're all working from the same product canvas or vision canvas, if you prefer. We're all in sync. We're, you know, the orchestra leader, you know, directs everything to make sure that we're all in sync, so that, you know, launch doesn't happen before release happens, or that the things that we're building are supported by the positioning that we do. The other thing about the orchestra leader that I like is if somebody in the orchestra can't play their part because they haven't practiced, they haven't prepared, the orchestra director or the orchestra leader does not go over and play the part. I mean, hey, the trumpet player is blowing his solo. I'm not going to go into the trumpet section and play the solo. That's not my job. I'm going to pretty abusive to the trumpet player and say, dude, you're supposed to practice. You know, we're running a business here. So I like this metaphor of the orchestra leader because I don't want to use the word control. The orchestra leader directs or gets everybody syncopated, gets everybody synchronized to, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, and here's visibility into what we're trying to accomplish. So the primary activity for product management is understanding markets and discovering their problems. And certainly for those of you who have followed me through Pragmatic all these years, you know, I've been saying the same thing for 30 years. Market problems, understanding markets, understanding market problems. So you know what? Let me pause here for a second, Dave, and see if any questions have come in, or if anybody wants to pop in a question. Looks like 0 questions have come in.
Well,
anybody
yeah,
have an issue they want to share with me before I move on?
Yeah, put them in the Q&A, anyone that has questions, and we'll get those to Steve. And if you don't have any now, of course, I'm sure things will be coming in throughout the session. And
let me tell you, I mean, I'll give you a chance to put in a question if you'd like. I'm going to shift here and start talking about titles, which are also a mess. So that's coming. Tell you what, I'll go ahead and proceed. And if you have questions as we go along, pop them in there, and I'll stop again in a few points to see if any questions have come in. So there we go. Moving on. Titles are a mess. I was working in a company last year or the year before. I had 12 people in the room, 12 different titles. They all did the same thing. And I've had so many meetings where people say, well, you know, I'm a this, what do I do? And I think that's the wrong question. It's more like, here's the work that needs doing. What are the titles that go with that? And we're going to look at that here in a moment. So this 3-column thing is a really handy tool for thinking about who does what around here. If your first name is product, if the first word of your title is product, your chief responsibility is understanding market problems. That's discovering problems and then working with solutions teams. There are 2 kinds of solutions team. One kind is called development or engineering. The other kind is called marketing. So I want you to think about this for a second. So we see problems in the market. We see that a customer is having an issue, you know, doing something. You know, I'm having, you know, I'd like to be able to import this thing into your product. I'd like to be able to convert data from one format to another. There's a story that we're going to take to development to build a feature to address. But we can do the same thing with marketing. We've seen friction, and the solution is not a new feature, but a new program. So, for instance, we did win-loss analysis. We saw that the sales team is constantly being asked something about the internals of the product, you know, something esoteric. And, you know, your first reaction is, well, you know, the salespeople should be able to answer these bits and bytes questions. But wait a minute, we didn't hire them for that. And maybe they don't have sales engineers, but even if they did, maybe they can't answer it either. So I've seen this friction in win-loss analysis, and I sit down with marketing and I say, I've seen this problem of needing to explain this technical thing. How do you think we ought to deal with that? You guys are experts in communication. I'm not. So what do you think? And they go, well, you know, we could write a 1-pager describing the technology, or, you know, we could do a video of the CTO talking about the technology choices that were made, and then embed that video in a PowerPoint, or, you know, make it an easy to find link on our webpage. And so we in product management find the problem and sit down with marketing and say, well, what do you think the solution would be to this? And that becomes even more interesting when we start talking about titles within product. And then the third group I want to talk about is the delivery team. Customer delivery is the realm of sales and support and services and success. They deal with people one at a time. The other groups I talked about deal with customers in the many. The product roles deal with markets. The solutions people deal with markets, development and marketing. Customer delivery is done by sales, support, and services and success. I was going to make a different point there, and then I forgot what it was. So I'll remember it here in a second. So almost instantly, people say, well, you know, we've got both product management and product marketing. What's the difference? And the easiest way to describe the difference is that product marketing focuses on the product we have today, the product we have now. And product management is thinking about what the product should be in the future. What new features do we need to increase our satisfaction scores? You know, what new capabilities do we need to put in to expand our reach to a new kind of persona, for instance? And so, one way of thinking about product management is, flip it around. So here's another one. Product marketing is to marketing as product management is to development. Product management typically, again, thinking about the future, works with development to say, we've seen these friction, these areas of friction in our users. Product marketing says, hey, we've seen these areas of friction with our buyers for the products that we have now, and they work with marketing to solve the friction, to address the friction. And increasingly, as your company gets a little bit larger, I'm starting to see three roles. Somebody focused on the product we have now, somebody focused on what's coming next, and somebody focused on the true future, like what new markets could we serve? What new products should we build? And the titles I typically see are some variant of these. The working from the bottom, the now person is a product marketer or a product marketing manager. Typically a product manager or typically a product marketer is working with marketing on the product we have now, looking for friction in buyers. The product owner is working with development for the product we'll have next, the next release, and they typically focus on the needs of the user. And then the product manager role, which sadly, I think a lot of organizations don't have anyone in truly the strategic role of product management, thinking about the future, new markets, new products. And maybe it's because the product owner is so busy working with development and the product marketer is so busy working with sales and marketing that nobody's got any time to think about where we ought to be 2 or 3 years from now. And I was working with a team 2-3 years ago, and the president complained to me that they had not introduced a new product in 5 years. 100% of their revenue came from products that were 5 years or older. And he was terribly concerned about innovation. And most CEOs are. An incredibly high number of CEOs think that innovation is critical to their future, like 80+%. And yet fewer than 10% feel that they have competence in innovation. And I think it's because they don't have anybody focused on it. They don't have anybody in a strategic product management role truly thinking about the future. So here are 3 things. This is the elephant in the room, right? These are the 3 things that keep executives up at night. How do we sell more of what we've built? Can we build what we've planned? And have we planned the right products? And if you can give me these 3 roles, product strategy, product planning, product growth, focused on the now, next, and the future, we've got somebody focused on each of those questions. Unfortunately, for many of us, we're not doing that role. What we're doing is project management for development and marketing, or we're doing sales engineering for the delivery team. Another quick story. I was working with a professional services team up north, and they made some comment about product managers writing statements of work. And what had happened was they had gotten a new VP of professional services, and the VP had come in and said, well, the sales guys are using the services people as sales engineers, and that's got to stop, which is true. What we need is and here's how they were using them. The services people were being asked to go on sales calls and other things, and were also responsible for doing statements of work. And so the VP said, well, the salespeople should do the statements of work. And those of you who have worked with salespeople know that's really a bad idea. And so then they said, well, if sales can't do it and I won't let services do it, then maybe we can get product management to do it. So suddenly product managers are doing the statements of work, focused on, implementation at a delivery level. And they didn't have time. They were so busy doing services work, they didn't have time to do the problem work. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was wondering if there was more to that story, but it's running long, so I'll stop there.
Well, and Steve, we have some questions too. If you want to,
sure.
Some questions.
This is a confrontational slide to leave up. Sure.
Well, and it might be related to it. So relating this map, can you map product development and R&D around this too? And I think you're going into this a little bit. How would you map in that function? Well,
I would define that development is focused on next and future. I mean, truly, if you have R&D, then R is really about the future, and D is about the next release. Mm-hmm. And I would, you know, as you see in the right part here, services is focused almost entirely on the product we have now. But let me jump. I kind of jumped over it here in the first column. The type of strategy, the type of activity in the problems column for the future is what I think of as product strategy. What's coming next is more product planning. The products we have now is more product growth. And the titles I typically see are product manager, product owner, and product marketing. And in addition to that, the product, whatever that product role is, wants to be monitoring the solutions and the delivery, looking for problems and friction. So I do have a question here. How do you ensure the problems get solved without focusing on the solution? Absolutely. We do want to, we definitely want to ensure that the solution solves the problem. What we don't want to do is define the solution. One of the most common complaints I get from development teams is that product managers, as they did in the video, came in and say, the product managers come in and say, here's the feature I want. And they're probably just repeating what they heard from a sales guy. So the sales guy came in and said, hey, I was talking to a customer, here's the feature they want. And a good product manager always says, yeah, but what problem are you trying to solve? Because customers are always wrong in what feature they want. They are always correct on what problem they're trying to solve, but they are almost never right in how to solve it. So I would argue that our role in product management is to sit down to development and say, here's the problem I'm trying to solve, and here's the persona who has the problem. And that context will give the development team the skills, the context they need to design a solution. And then as part of the give and take here, they say, okay, hey, Steve, we've decided to build this. We've decided the solution for your problem is this. What do you think? And I go back to problem mode. And I'm like, well, all right, let's walk through this problem. I was talking to Jim and he told me this, and will the thing you've proposed solve that problem? And we all agree that it does. And we write our stories. If you're not doing this, you should. All of your stories should be written in concert with your development team. Don't just write them and poke them in Jira. You need a requirement or a story needs to be written in collaboration with development, and then you can articulate your acceptance criteria. But at the end of the day, if development says the answer to this is some esoteric thing that does address the acceptance criteria, hallelujah. I think a lot of times product managers are doing design because no one in development will. But development, if you ask any developer or any engineer what they do, they'll tell you they are problem solvers. But their frustration with product management is product managers are often feature speakers, and we want to avoid that. So here's another question from Maggie. Can you speak to the business analyst transitioning to product manager? You know, I find in a lot of organizations, the titles are, well, as I said, titles are a mess. Some business analysts are already product owners. They're doing the work. So if you think about the work that needs to be done, then look at those activities and say, you know what, I am doing the work and I want the title. Some product managers are not product managers. They're sales engineers. Let me go back a slide. They're supporting sales, or they're supporting services, or they're project managers for for development and marketing. In case, who was it? It's escaped me. One of the people I work with said, most product managers are not doing the job that their company needs them to do, because they're so busy helping understaffed and underskilled teams in the solutions and delivery area that they have failed to do their own jobs. And here's a hint. If you haven't talked to a customer in the last week, you're not doing product management. So if we've got these three roles, somebody looking at the future, somebody looking at what's next, somebody dealing with what we have now, we will have someone focused on planning the right products, building what we've planned, and selling what we've built. So here's the takeaway here. Write down all the activities that are expected from the product team today. And I have to tell you, some job descriptions are laughable. When I get them, I go, well, you know, you've described the work of 6 people here. And there's a funny line that my friend, I have a recruiter friend who uses this term that I've adopted called purple squirrel. And a purple squirrel is like a unicorn who will work for peanuts. Like, a purple squirrel doesn't exist in nature, but we see these job postings where they're asking for 20 years experience with SaaS. And I don't know that SaaS has actually been an option for 20 years. I saw one recently for wanting 15 years of social media experience. And, you know, who has that? So we have these impossible job descriptions where they want 20 years experience in their domain and 13 years experience as a product manager, and lives in the same zip code as the corporate office and willing to travel 80%. And they're just kind of ridiculous. But you start looking at those activities that you're doing, and you can use this tool to say, well, let me focus on the ones that are market problems and send all the others to the appropriate department. So if you're doing design for development, you know, sit down with development and say, is this what you want? Do you want to be a factory worker? Do you want to be just crunching out code, or do you want to be designing solutions? Because that's what development should be doing. And likewise, marketing. They hate this. You know, product managers come in and say, we're going to launch a product. Here's my laundry list of things I want. And you know what? They've got the same problems development has. So many requests for functionality and so limited resources. So let's leverage that and sit down with have product sit down with marketing and say, here are the problems I'm running into selling the product. Here's the friction we're seeing in buyers. Help me design solutions. So prioritize those activities that are related to markets and their problems, and redirect those, particularly those that are related to single customers, off to one of the departments that has an S in its name. You know, sales, support, services, and success. And if you have enough people involved, it's really great if you can say, you know, we're going to have one person thinking about the products we ought to have in 2 or 3 years, one or more people focusing on what's coming next, and then somebody focus on the products we have now. And when we try to do all of those things, you'll end up with way too much going on. At the beginning of my presentation, one more slide here. And so our goal in product management is to turn good ideas into successful products systematically. And the way you do that is by empowering the organization with problems to be solved and personas who have them. Developers want the context. They don't want you to tell them what to build. Likewise, marketing. And if we can build a product that sells itself, salespeople will love it. So I named my company Under 10 because I'm very closely aligned with and supportive of the Pragmatic Framework. But 37 boxes is too many things for one person to do. I suggest that each of us look at the Pragmatic Marketing Framework and say, what 10 or fewer will I take responsibility for? And so the framework has done a very good job of helping us define the amazing scope of what's expected from product management and marketing. Pick 10 or fewer. So my company name was Under 10 Consulting, with the idea of focusing only on less than 10 of those activities for any one role. And it helps, I think, if you start thinking about maybe we should be problem managers instead of product managers. And one last little gag. I did a conference a while back, and the theme of the conference was love your product. And I reject that premise. Developers should love the product. Product managers should love the problem. Let's ponder on that while we go into some more questions. I do, as I said, as Dave said, I have got my book, available on Amazon. Go to turnideasintoproducts.info to get a link there. It's available on Kindle as well as in actual physical paper. And you can stay in touch with me. I've got my contact information coming up. I got one last story about working as a team. This is not my family, by the way, but a bunch of us went whitewater rafting in Nantahala, North Carolina. And if you haven't gone, it's a trip. It's a lot of fun. And my nephews wanted to sit up front so they could steer. Now, you should already know that's a bad thing, right? And it was hysterical to watch them. I was sitting in the back next to the guide because I figured he was going to get the least wet. But up front, Russ is in one corner paddling as hard as he can that way, and Jeff is in the other corner paddling as fast as he can that way. And the guide and I are just laughing because the guide is controlling the direction of the raft. And at the end of the day, Russ and Jeff got off that raft and they were almost incapable of movement. I mean, they're exhausted. And I got off the raft and I'm like, hey, who wants to go for a jog? I was completely refreshed. It was a wonderful day on the water. And the problem was they had been fighting the guide the whole way. And sadly, I think that parallels a lot of product teams, that development and sales are trying so hard to steer the product in different directions. And they're effectively fighting the guide, which is the product manager. The guy in the back of the boat with the rudder is ultimately determining product direction. So I see we have some more questions come in. Let me put up my contact information. If you want to stay in touch with me or send a follow-up email, Steve@Under10 Consulting, and come take my survey at u10.me/survey to learn, to get some insights on professional development. But let me stop my, Dave, turn back to you and say, do you have any questions for me?
So let's go through some of the questions that we have here, and anyone else that has any questions, put in the Q&A. So one that let's hit right now is, where are most product managers located within their organizations? Because we're talking a lot about different roles, but there's also just, especially as the large behemoth organizations or mid-sized organizations, where's product management? Where should it be?
Oh, well, see, that's two questions. Okay. Where is it and where should it be? Pragmatic gives us some good insights there. Pragmatic Institute has been running an annual survey since 1999 when I started it, and I don't remember who's running it inside the company now, but I think it doesn't matter. They do a survey every year. They publish the survey on their website for free, and it gives you an insight of where everybody is. But as I recall, the number one location for product management is in its own department called product, reporting to the CEO. The number two is marketing. The number three is development. But it has a lot to do with how you choose to define this role that we've been talking about. Let me go back. Here we go. If the CEO says the product manager's job is to sell more of what we have now, then it's quite likely that they'll want to put product management in marketing. If they say, well, no, the product manager is more focused on what is coming in the next release, then they're thinking, next, they're more likely to be in development. So if you think about that dichotomy, if product management, by whatever title, is a now department, it's in marketing. If it's a next department, it's in development. And if it's truly a future department, it's going to be in its own department. I believe you can look at the stats on Pragmatic's website, but I believe that it's the number one place is product, the number two place is marketing, the number three place is development. And nobody ever puts product in sales. Hallelujah. And here's why. One of the difficulties, back to the second part of the question, which was where should it be? It should be in product, because if you put it in one of those other departments, then it will become subordinate to that department's primary goal. And development's primary goal is designing solutions. right? Marketing's primary goal is awareness and leads. Sales' primary goal is closing deals. So if you put product management in sales, guess what? You've got another bunch of sales engineers, but they won't be doing any of the product stuff.
Great points. And this one might be a little loaded and a little career advice for Sukriti. So if my company does not expect a PM to do discovery, but rather execution and solution building, what are the suggestions for me? Should I leave for a better company?
Yeah, I was going to say that, but now that you put it in the question, maybe I shouldn't. You know, I want to say that let's show them by our actions. So much of what I've done in my career with Pragmatic and now with Under 10 Consulting is to show techniques that can be done without permission. And it's generally pretty easy for someone in a BA, a business analyst role, a product owner role, a technical product manager role to connect with a customer. Go to support and say, can you give me some names of some people who like us? In my career, I've always had 2 or 3 people that I could call without permission, without having to check with anybody. And, they wouldn't rat me out to the sales guy, or they wouldn't tweet what we talked about. But my suggestion would be to show them through action. If I could just talk to 2 or 3 people and then I start representing them in all of my conversation. I talked to a guy the other day is so much better than God spoke to me in a dream and suggested that we build this feature, or a sales guy came in and said, there's a chance I can close a deal if you build this feature, which has never happened in history. One thing that's an interesting metric, I'm writing about metrics right now, is how many deals were enabled because of a feature. And so far, the answer is 0. But I digress. What else you got?
Yes, well, so I think this goes back to your initial analogy of what is the role of the conductor when the orchestra is completely out of sync?
Well, absolutely, right? I mean, I think that's why it's a very popular metaphor, for at least for me. I go back to being transparent and being highly communicative. And that is let me do it as a story. I was hired to do some consulting work, and the president said to me, development is broken. So I went into the dev team and I said, so, hey, I hear you guys suck. And and the guy there said, well, okay, that's one way of thinking of it. But actually, we're practicing a thing we call requirements aging. We don't work on anything for a month. And I said, why is that? And he said, because the requirements change every week. And while we're having this conversation, the VP of development comes in and says, guys, stop what you're doing. I'm getting new requirements. And he's like, see what I mean? So the following Monday, I went into senior leadership meeting and I said, hey guys, I found the problem in development. It's you guys. You need to shut the hell up for 90 days and I'll ship something. And so I then sat down with product management and the development team and said, we are going to ship something in 90 days. You get to pick what it is. I don't even care. I want to see this company ship something. And they said, oh yeah, we've got a laundry list of things that we know we need to do, but we're constantly being distracted by deal of the day, or the president had an idea, or the investor thinks we should use a blue or blue. And I'm like, great, send all that stuff into the backlog, but don't put it on the release backlog. Don't start working on it until it's been vetted. So I would argue to get people in sync, do the rudiments of product management, understand the market, build a backlog, prioritize it for business value, and never let anyone talk to developers. One final thing I did in that scenario I was just telling you was in this company, the developers were in their own lab and the lab had a door with a lock. And I changed everybody's security key to not be able to access that part of the building. And it drove everybody crazy. And I'm like, but wait, there is literally no reason for you to go talk to a developer unless you are bringing them food. Well, I just had this idea and I wanted to float by development. That's not their job. Why doesn't everybody just do their own frickin' job for like a week and let's just see how it goes, all right? And sure enough, just funneling ideas through the product manager through a prioritization process and putting it on a Kanban board and letting the developers pull work when they had resources and, you know, finishing stuff was what got everybody back in sync again. And I read a book a couple of years ago that I really liked. Patrick Lencioni wrote a book called something, sorry, The Advantage. There we go. I knew I'd get it. The Advantage. And he said, you know, it really helps if we can all just work for the same company. But it seems like the VP of development is working for a products company and the VP of sales is working for a consulting company. And no wonder we're misaligned. We can't even agree on the product vision. So do good product management, build a vision canvas, build a business oriented backlog, you know, do the work that we can teach you to do, and get everybody aligned based on leadership.
Great words of wisdom. And I know we're out of time for questions, but there are a few more. I'm sure you'll be able to take a look at those and maybe answer those afterwards. And really appreciate your time today, Steve, and, you know, all the wisdom. Certainly anyone that's interested, great to do that u10.me/survey. Make sure to, you know, help Steve out. We want to contribute our knowledge, just like when Pragmatic comes with their survey each year. I actually put their most recent survey in the chat area, but definitely you should be participating. You want to, just like you want to share, learn, connect today, you want to participate in those things, because together, when we have more transparency about these things, we're going to all be better off. So really thank you again today, Steve, and we'll see the rest of you in the next things. We have a few minutes until 11:10 Central, when the next sessions will start up. Between now and then, though, if you want to go into the networking area, of course you can do that, or you can step in a lounge, or just, you know, take a walk away from the computer a little bit. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.